just really puts a damper on the economic value that can be
Got it.
produced by those systems.
That they'll be technologically mature. It's just a question of whether they'll be reliable enough.
Yeah, well, in some sense, not reliable means not technologically mature, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, fair enough. What's after generative models, right? So before you're working on reinforcement learning, is this basically it? Is this a paradigm that gets us to AGI, or is there something after this?
I mean, I think this paradigm is going to go really, really far, and I would not underestimate it. I think it's quite likely that this exact paradigm is not going to be quite the AGI form factor. I mean, I hesitate to say precisely what the next paradigm will be, but I think it will probably involve integration of all the different ideas that came in the past.
Is there some specific one you're referring to, or?
I mean, it's hard to be specific.
So you could argue that the next token prediction can only help us match human performance, and maybe not surpass it. What would it take to surpass human performance?
So I challenge the claim that next token prediction cannot surpass human performance. It looks like on the surface it cannot. It looks on the surface, if you just learn to imitate, to predict what people do, it means that you can only copy people. But here is a counter argument for why it might not be quite so. If your base neural net is smart enough, you just ask it like, what would a person with great insight and wisdom and capability do? Maybe such a person doesn't exist, but there's a pretty good chance that the neural net will be able to extrapolate how such a person should behave. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, although where would it get the sort of insight about what that person would do, if not from
the data of regular people? Because like, if you think about it, what does it mean to predict the next token well enough? What does it mean actually? It's a deeper question than it seems. Predicting the next token well means that you understand the underlying reality that led to the creation of that token. It's not statistics. Like, it is statistics, but what is statistics? In order to understand those statistics, to compress them, you need to understand what is it about the world that creates those statistics. And so then you say, okay, well, I have all those people. What is it about people that creates their behaviors? Well, they have, they have thoughts and they have feelings and they have ideas and they do things in certain ways. All of those could be deduced from next token prediction. And I'd argue that this should make it possible, not indefinitely, but to a pretty decent degree, to say, well, can you guess what you'd do if you took a person with like this characteristic and that characteristic? Like, such a person doesn't exist. But because you're so good at predicting the next token, you should still be able to guess what that person would do, this hypothetical, imaginary person with far greater mental ability than the rest of us.
When we're doing reinforcement learning on these models, how long before most of the data for the reinforcement learning is coming from AIs and not humans?
I mean, already most of the data for reinforcement learning is coming from AIs. Yeah. Well, it's like the humans are being used to train the reward function, but then the reward function in its interaction with the model is automatic, and all the data that's generated during the process of reinforcement learning is created by AI. So like, if you look at the current, I would say, technique paradigm, which has been getting some significant attention because of ChatGPT, reinforcement learning from human feedback. So there is human feedback. The human feedback is being used to train the reward function. And then the reward function is being used to create the data which trains the model.
Got it. And is there any hope of just removing the human from the loop and have it improve itself and some sort of alpha go away?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I feel like in some sense our hopes for like our plan, like very much so. The thing you really want is for the human teachers that teach the AI, for them to collaborate with an AI. So you might want to think about it. You might want to think of it as being in a world where the human teachers do 1% of the world and the work, and the AI do 99% of the work. You don't want it to be 100% AI, but you do want it to be a human-machine collaboration, which teaches the next machine.
So currently, I mean, I've had a chance to play around these models. They seem bad at multi-step reasoning, and they have been getting better. But what does it take to really surpass that barrier?
I mean, I think dedicated training will get us there. More improvements of the base models will get us there.
Okay.
But like, fundamentally, I also don't feel like they're that bad at multi-step reasoning. I actually think that they are bad at mental multi-step reasoning, but they're not allowed to think out loud. But when they are allowed to think out loud, they're quite good. And I expect this to improve significantly, both with better models and with special training.
Are you running out of reasoning tokens on the internet? Are there enough of them?
I mean, so for context on this question, like there are claims that indeed at some point we'll run out of tokens in general to train those models. And yeah, I think this will happen one day, and by the time that happens, we need to have other ways of training models, other ways of productively improving their capabilities and sharpening their behavior, making sure they're doing precisely what we want without more data.
Well, you haven't run out of data yet. There's more.
Yeah, I would say the data situation is still quite good. There is still lots to go. But at some point, data will run out.
Okay. What is the most valuable source of data? Is it Reddit, Twitter, books? What would you trade many other tokens of other varieties for?
Generally speaking, you'd like tokens which are, speaking about smarter things, tokens which are like more interesting.
Yeah.
So I mean, all the sources which you mentioned, they're valuable.
Okay. So maybe not Twitter, but do we need to go multimodal to get more tokens, or do we still have enough text tokens left?
I mean, I think that you can still go very far in text only, but going multimodal seems like a very fruitful direction.
If you're comfortable talking about this, like where is the place where we haven't scraped the tokens yet?
Oh, I mean, yeah, obviously. I mean, I can't answer that question for us, but I'm sure that for everyone, there's a different answer to that question.
How many orders of magnitude improvement can we get just not from scale or not from data, but just from algorithmic improvements?
Hard to answer, but I'm sure there is some.
Is some a lot or is some a little?
I mean, it's only one way to find out.
Okay. Let me get to your quick fire opinions about these different research directions. Retrieval transformers. So just somehow storing the data outside of the model itself and retrieving it somehow.
Seems promising.
But do you see that as a path forward, or?
I think it seems promising.
Robotics. Was it the right step for OpenAI to leave that behind?
Yeah, it was. Like back then, it really wasn't possible to continue working in robotics because there was so little data. Like back then, if you wanted to work on robotics, you needed to become a robotics company. You needed to really have a giant group of people working on building robots and maintaining them and even